For years, fighting games groped around in the dark, still in their infancy. Then, Street Fighter II changed everything. In the 90s, you saw an explosion of games inspired by it, many acclaimed, but with one thing in common. They all started in the arcade. Recognizing the market demand on other platforms, fighters started making their way to home consoles. After all, going side by side at a cabinet is pretty similar to going at it with two controllers. This is where our story starts. Nowadays, the PC is a legitimate platform to play fighting games after the dawn of online gaming, but in an era when people were still using dial-up and couch co-op was an expected feature, how do you translate this into this? With difficulty. This is Tough Guy for DOS, developed by Panda Entertainment in 1995. Look at that opening, those graphics, it's so colorful, the music is good, the characters are expressive. What could go wrong? Answer, controls. So, WASD controls weren't standard at the time, so I can't be that mad at them, but did you have to copy the arcade stick layout like this? Okay, R is up, D is left, G is right, V is down. There are 2 punches and 2 kicks mapped to Q, W, A, and S respectively. You have to claw your hands so close together, it's brutally uncomfortable. Let's see, can you rebind controls? No, it doesn't look like it. Enlarger effect? What is that? Don't turn that on. How does the actual game fare? Not much better. It's a standard 2D fighter, and though it lacks any documentation, everyone here does have a range of special moves, and I think command normals? Taking right off of Street Fighter and Fatal Fury, it features a multicultural cast with their own gimmicks and playstyles. As a single-player experience, it's pretty bad. On top of the mangling controls, the AI exposes what I think is a serious flaw in its core mechanics. Okay, you know Elena's Ultra in Street Fighter 4 that heals her? The one everyone hates because it makes any engagements with her pointless? Imagine that's every character. Now, again, finding any documentation for this game is impossible, so I can't confirm this for myself, but characters can do this charge-up move like Dragon Ball FighterZ, except it fills your super meter and your health. This leads to really boring, uninteractive fights where any damage you do is erased the second your opponent decides to back off. I lost most of these matches because I didn't know how to do this charge-up move, and the enemy used hit-and-run tactics to whittle me away and heal all their damage back, while I'm just fighting my keyboard trying to approach them. Overall, it's a waste of potential from what could have been a hidden gem. I mean, look at these characters. You've got martial artists, street punks, and, well, you want to talk Akatsuki Blitzkampf. Why don't you try, oh man. Oh man. Yeah, Panda Entertainment were apparently kind of notorious for putting playable Hitlers and Nazis in their games. Like, hilarious bowling?
Yeah.
Oh my god. We're getting off topic. Hey, remember Mortal Kombat? If you... Antagony. This game is agony, if you know what I mean. A weird reality of DOS emulation is that you'll run into games that really aren't optimized for your system. Now, usually unoptimized means slower, but here... what? Try as I might, I just could not find a cycle setting that would run the game at an appropriate speed, so slightly too fast it is. It's a bog-standard Mortal Kombat clone without the things that made Mortal Kombat stand out besides the digitized actors. Maybe this was cool in 1995, but now it's just stiff and odd feeling. It uses the number pad for controls, which isn't terrible in a more grounded game like this, but there are only 2 attacks, punch and kick, and they're mapped to enter and right shift. I'm not sure if it's my keyboard or the game, but it feels unresponsive. Like, I hit punch, and sometimes punch doesn't come out. Like, the input just gets eaten. At first, I was confused as to why I was getting hit. Then I checked a copy of the manual online and discovered that blocking in this game is done by pressing back and punch. You had an entire keyboard to work with. And the main functions of your game you mapped to enter, right shift, and holding back plus enter. Amazing. There's actually a speed slider in the options. I understand why it's there, because the developers didn't know how to make a fighting game. I just think it's funny that you would include that, and not a way to bind inputs. Characters have special moves, 1 or 2 each, but good luck actually getting any of them to come out. Again, no way to tell if it's not reading my inputs or the timing is just Street Fighter 1 levels of tight. Overall, this one is very skippable, nothing to write home about. There's no smooth segue into the next game besides the Mortal Kombat comparison. Battle of the Eras. Looking at this, you might see some incongruities. There's some decent music, it runs fine, it looks almost professional. The truth is, this game was made by a group of 14-year-olds in Ontario in 1995. There's him. There's Gatekeeper. It wears its Mortal Kombat inspirations on its sleeve, from the digitized sprites to the control scheme. I scrutinize it much differently from Antagony. One, because Antagony only seems like it was made by 14-year-olds, while this game was. And 2, I think it's actually better. I'm not kidding. Battle of the Eras lacks a lot of the stiffness of the previous games. The animations are by no means fluid, but they still have enough frames that the player knows what's going on most of the time, at least. This is a great example of something that gets by in retrospect with all the heart put into it. I remember filming in Mark's basement, taping up all the props and babysitting Tom's little brother Rob as we were doing all of this. I recall a lot of people were wondering what we were up to, and I'm sure Mark's parents thought we were pretty weird kids. Thankfully, we never filmed outside or in public in our small town. It would have drawn quite the odd stares. Listen to this story and tell me this wasn't written by a nerdy 14-year-old who took themselves too seriously. It is the year 80,000 AD. Humankind has advanced all it can and now is facing the frightening threat of de-evolution. All that was achieved, accomplished, overcome, threatened to be lost. The humans were desperately trying to achieve non-corporeality, but they had made a grave mistake on choosing how to do it. The gene pool was severely depleted, and anomalous mutations were appearing, which was the biggest threat of all as they reproduced with cloning. Really, do I have to go any further? That's a real question. It goes on for like 3 minutes. I was pleasantly surprised by what I found in Battle of the Eras. It's full of bad AI and wonky hit detection, but you start to appreciate its homemade charm right around the time you're reading the move list and learn that the controls for one of the characters are reversed, because the programmer who played him was left-handed. If we're going to talk about low-budget PC fighters, let me introduce you to One Must Fall 2097. Developed by the one-man team of Rob Elam, going as Diversions Entertainment, One Must Fall 2097 came only 3 years after Street Fighter II, and it's good. It's really good, actually. Elam first devised it as a traditional martial arts-themed fighter, but after a successful proof of concept, decided his talents lay more in 3D modeling, and thus he made the pivot to a futuristic setting, pitting robot mechs against each other. You don't just pick your robot, however, you also pick a pilot. Each pilot has their own plot line with a resolution at the end of arcade mode, which is a nice touch. What's really cool from a gameplay perspective is the impact they have on their mechs. See, each pilot is graded differently on power, agility, and endurance. This means that in addition to the qualities of the mechs, you can further customize your playstyle with different pilots. For instance, a high agility pilot like Crystal or Milano get better frame advantage on their moves, so certain mechs can get access to combos they wouldn't have with slower pilots. It's a super cool mechanic, and the only thing that even sort of resembles it is the moon system from Melty Blood. Even with just a single punch and kick, the characters have a variety of command normals and special inputs. There's tick throws, set play, mix-ups, rushdown, actual fighting game stuff. Every stage has some kind of interactive element. These are pretty neat, but I'll admit that their randomness can get frustrating. I feel like the plains and the desert stage come by a little too often, and the dizzy state they inflict is a little much for how wide an area they cover. Also, the timing and location of these spikes in the dungeon stage is seemingly just totally random. Other than that, this is another neat idea that helps the game stand out. Wall splatting someone in this power line stage and getting extra damage from the electrocution is rad. Most fighting game stages are just set dressing, but this adds a whole new dynamic. There's only 5 stages, and I wish more of them worked like this instead of random hazards. The interaction with the environment makes stage selection actually meaningful and encourages players to learn combos that lead into things like wall splats in case they land on this level. I think the most impressive thing about OMF 2097 is how good it feels. Control is always difficult to describe, but so many of these fighting games suffer from awkward button layouts, bad input reading, or stiff animations, and this one just doesn't. You're free to remap the controls, buttons are responsive, and the characters move with enough deliberation and follow through to communicate the strength of attacks. There's a little bit of rigidness with jumping, but I chalk that up to my affinity for air dashing fighters, and hey, there's even a mech for that. One Must Fall 2097 got rave reviews, and Elam was looking to develop a sequel. He was published by Epic Mega Games, who you might now know as just Epic. At this point it gets hard to confirm details because little of this is substantiated, but multiple accounts suggest that he wanted to go full 3D using Epic's new Unreal Engine. As it was still early in release, maybe even in development, they refused, and Elam built his own engine, Phoenix, to make the game. Not much is known about the development of the follow-up, One Must Fall Battlegrounds, but it took about 7 years. In late December 2003, it released exclusively for Windows PC, featuring full 3D arenas, tons of new pilots and mechs, and online multiplayer for up to 16 people at a time. Unfortunately, it would be met with lukewarm reception for its execution. Reviews pointed out clunky gameplay, awkward animations, lack of variety in stage layouts, small move lists, game-breaking bugs, and dull characters. It sucks because this concept is so exciting, but Battlegrounds just needed a bigger budget behind it for that extra polish. 2097 still has a community, however, with an active remake project that's been in development for at least 8 years. If you want a 3D mech fighter, you'll have to stick to the Gundam Versus series, but I'd love to see someone take a crack at the pilot system like OMF, even if it was in the 2D style of 2097. I mean, how many games do you see whose instruction manuals quote from... Why do you keep showing up? Well, this was fun, but I ended up with a lot more games to talk about than was realistic to fit into one video, so if anyone wants to see a follow-up to this with more PC fighting games, give this a like, and I could probably make a follow-up talking about... Oh.